You grab a can of chicken because it makes life easier. It's quick, it's tidy, and it turns into dinner without much effort. Nothing wrong with that. But if canned chicken has become your go-to, it might be time to slow down and look at what you're actually opening. Many cans look trustworthy at first glance, long shelf life, familiar labels, and a promise to help with quick soups or salads. But the closer you look, the more the details start to matter. Salt levels that climb fast, thickeners that change how the meat behaves, and water weight that quietly replaces real protein. If you're watching blood pressure, kidney health, or just trying to eat cleaner, those little trade-offs can make a real difference over time. This video isn't here to scare you. We want to protect your plate and your health without taking away the convenience you count on. So today we're opening 7 cans you should think twice about and showing exactly how they fall short. 1 Swanson Premium Chunk Chicken. Swanson Premium Chunk Chicken shows up with a confident label, but the moment you open the can, things shift. You expect firm white meat. Instead, you meet something that stops your hand. Mid-pour rims of soft, fat, scattered gray specks and broth that clouds before it even touches the bowl. It feels like the kind of scene that makes you lean back a little just to understand what you're looking at. On the surface, Swanson carries the kind of name people grew up trusting. It sounds steady, familiar, even comforting. But once you look closer, the picture changes. A major blind taste test in 2024 ranked it last out of 13 brands. Last. Not for flavor, not for price, but because the testers wouldn't even taste it after seeing what was inside. That alone tells you how far the can drifts from the premium promise printed on the label. Appearance is where the disappointment begins, not where it ends. Swanson's chicken looks like chunks, but the behavior is different. The fibers collapse on contact, the surface carries a slickness that feels out of place, and the broth leaves a faint haze over everything it touches. Once you start inspecting the label, the pieces fall into place. Modified starch, sodium phosphate, flavoring, a short line that mentions a bioengineered ingredient. Nothing outrageous on its own, but together they show how heavily the product leans on support rather than substance. And that's the real gap here. You open the can expecting real chicken to stand on its own. Instead, you get chicken that needs help. Help to hold shape, help to stay moist, help to taste like something familiar. When a food depends on this many adjustments to behave like itself, you start to question what premium is supposed to mean. More importantly, the way it cooks tells the truth faster than the label. In a pan, the pieces break down too quickly. In a casserole, the texture turns soft before the rest of the dish comes together. The flavor stays flat no matter how much seasoning you add. Even a generous amount of broth or cream cannot bring back what isn't there from the start. You feel the shortcuts not in the label, but in the meal. For older viewers watching Sodium, the story becomes even clearer. Every additive adds a little extra burden. Every heavy hand of salt pushes the dish further away from simple eating. Nobody expects canned chicken to behave like a rotisserie bird, but Swanson doesn't even meet the level of straightforward honesty that many cheaper store brands manage without fuss. The moment that sums it all up is simple. A home cook opens a can for a pie, pauses, looks again, and quietly reaches for frozen chicken instead. No speech, no complaint, just a small decision based on what the eyes are telling the mind. A name can say premium, but the can tells the real story. 2 Trader Joe's Premium Chunk White Chicken. I paid for chicken, not a can of flavored water. That single complaint sums up the entire problem with Trader Joe's Premium Chunk White Chicken, a product that once carried real trust, now leaving customers confused at the checkout line and disappointed in the kitchen. For a long time, Trader Joe's held a special place in people's routines. It wasn't just a grocery store, it was a place where you felt like the quality took one small step above the ordinary. The canned chicken used to follow that pattern. It came out in real chunks, the fibers pulled naturally, and the broth didn't flood the cutting board. You knew what you were opening, and you knew it would work, but somewhere along the way, something shifted. Lift the lid today, and the change is immediate. What once looked like solid white chicken now slides out in thin, soft shreds that drift through a pale, almost diluted broth. The chicken doesn't settle at the bottom of the can, it floats. And when you tilt it, you hear more water than meat. Drain it, and the truth becomes even clearer. The can looks full, but the plate says otherwise. There simply isn't much chicken left to work with. A major blind test in 2024 echoed that same experience. Trader Joe's ranked second lowest out of 13 brands tested. The panel described it as mostly water with tiny fragments of poultry, and anyone who has opened a can recently knows that description isn't an exaggeration. The chicken breaks apart with barely any pressure, the flavor thins out before it reaches the fork, and the broth leaves the impression of something stretched beyond its limit. And that hits loyal customers harder than any label ever could. When a brand builds its name on reliability, Any downgrade, even a subtle one, feels personal. People who bought this can for years now find their meals falling short. A chicken salad that once held shape now turns loose and watery. A quick soup ends up tasting faint. A wrap needs more mayo, more seasoning, more effort just to feel complete. It's not just the food that changes, it's the small sense of trust that used to sit behind every can. Online feedback reflects that same quiet frustration. Barely any chicken in there. Used to be better, not the same anymore. Too watery to make anything decent. I don't understand why the price stayed high, but the chicken disappeared. These aren't angry comments. They're disappointed ones, the kind that come from customers who genuinely wanted the product to stay the way it used to be. If anything, the tenderness of the feedback shows how loyal people once were, and the health angle adds another layer. Despite all that water, the sodium still climbs higher than many expect. For older shoppers watching blood pressure or trying to keep meals balanced, that combination low meat, high salt feels like an unfair trade-off. You're giving up nutrition and flavor, but still taking on the same sodium load. In the end, Trader Joe's didn't lose on taste alone. It lost on value, on consistency, and on the quiet confidence people once had when they placed a can into their basket. A product that used to feel dependable now leaves you wondering when the change happened and why it had to. 3 great value chunk chicken. What's the point of saving $1 if your body pays the price later? That question hangs heavy over great value chunk chicken, a product that looks harmless, feels affordable, and quietly asks more from your health than it ever admits on the label. On the surface, it sounds like a simple budget choice. One can cost less, stretches farther, and seems perfect for quick salads, sandwiches, or those evenings when cooking feels like a chore. But once you look at the numbers, the picture changes fast. A single serving can push the sodium from roughly 380 to over 500 milligrams depending on the batch. Add modified starch, sodium, phosphate, and flavorings. And you're not just buying chicken anymore, you're buying a load. Your body has to process long after the meal ends. High sodium draws fluid into the bloodstream, raising volume and tightening pressure on the arteries. It forces the heart to push harder. Phosphate additives go even deeper, slipping into the bloodstream faster than natural phosphate and placing extra strain on the kidneys. Retention swelling and electrolyte misfires can appear before people even connect the dots. As one renal dietitian puts it plainly, most adults underestimate how quickly phosphate additives add stress to the kidneys. You feel the effects long before you see them. Then there's the sensory part, the thing you notice before any medical chart ever comes into play. The meat comes out in threads that break too clean, almost like pieces shaped in a mold. The scent has a faint metallic edge, the kind that doesn't rise sharply but lingers. Mix it into a dish, and the texture softens too quickly, refusing to behave like real chicken. It fills the bowl, sure, but it doesn't hold the meal. And that's where the hidden cost lives. You think you're stretching your budget. In reality, you're stretching your body, stretching your kidneys, your blood pressure, and your heart across numbers that climb with every can. Many older adults eat canned chicken during busy weeks, never realizing how the salt and phosphate stack up over time, especially when paired with bread dressings or canned soups already high in sodium. It's the kind of burden you only understand once it shows itself. Just ask Daniel, a 40-something warehouse worker who leaned on canned chicken as his go-to quick protein. It was cheap, easy, and fit into a lunchbox, but weeks turned into months and the signals began. A tightening in his lower back, odd swelling in the evenings, a sense that his body felt heavier after meals. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet discomfort that grew harder to ignore. His doctor later pointed to his sodium and phosphate intake. The advice was simple: switch to proteins that don't ask his kidneys to work overtime. Daniel gave up the cans. They were convenient, yes, but not worth the way his body felt afterward. So here's the real advice: if you need canned chicken, choose one with short ingredients under 150 milligrams of sodium per serving and no phosphates. If a brand can't meet those 3 rules, leave it on the shelf. Because the bargain only counts if your body stays healthy enough to enjoy it. For Valley Fresh Chicken, if great value tests your health, Valley Fresh tests your expectations. And the surprise hits immediately in independent draining tests. Less than half of it, and even the organic version turns out to be real chicken. One half goes into the meal, the other half quietly runs down the sink. When you see that ratio, the next step is to understand how a product reaches that point. The answer isn't scandal, it's structure. Valley Fresh builds its formula around water rice starch and tapioca starch. These are stabilizers that keep the meat soft, keep the liquid from separating too harshly, and create the illusion of a fuller can. It is food engineering designed to meet cost targets without openly betraying the flavor profile. And behind those choices is something more complicated than greed. The canned meat market is brutal. Chicken prices swing. Transportation costs rise. Shelf-stable protein needs to survive long months of storage with minimal loss. So brands stretch where they can. Water is inexpensive. Starch is predictable. Meat is volatile. A food economist once explained it this way. In any processed protein category, companies survive by smoothing out the cost curve. Every percentage of water added is protection against next quarter's instability. So yes, Valley Fresh adapts. It trims. It stabilizes. It makes a product that fits the numbers the market demands. But that still leaves the other half of the story, the people buying it. Customers today are more vulnerable than ever. Prices squeeze harder. Families stretch meals further. Older adults seek convenient proteins that won't spoil or break the budget. Canned chicken looks like the perfect answer, dependable, simple, and safe. Labels promise natural, organic, no antibiotics. Packaging feels calm and reassuring. People pick it up because it feels like the least risky choice in an aisle filled with uncertainty. And there is something deeply human in that. You're not buying luxury. You're buying time. You're buying simplicity. You're buying a little piece during a week that's already heavy. That's why it's so easy to trust a can that feels solid in the hand. The weight suggests value. The marketing suggests honesty. The longevity suggests security. But when the meal finally comes together, the truth settles quietly. A pot pie that should feed 4 stretches thinner. A soup loses its body. A casserole needs more bulk from somewhere else. Not because the brand deceived you maliciously, but because survival in this market forces companies to make decisions that don't always align with what the customer hopes for. And this is where caution becomes necessary. Not anger, not blame, just clarity. Because if the world is tightening, then the shopper needs a wise hand to pause to question, to decide with a clear head what's worth bringing home. Picture this. A housewife stands in the aisle, turns a can of Valley Fresh in her hand, looks at the drained weight line, and thinks about dinner. After a moment, she sets the can back, pushes her cart forward, and chooses fresh chicken instead. 5 Tyson White Premium Chunk Chicken. Good taste should not feel this far from the real thing. And that's where Tyson White Premium Chunk Chicken stands, a familiar name, a bold flavor, but a flavor that tells a very different story once you compare it to pure, unprocessed chicken. Think about what real chicken tastes like. Fresh pieces pull apart in gentle, uneven fibers, each strand holding warmth and moisture. The aroma is soft, almost shy, a clean, steady scent that rises only when the heat hits it. The first chew is quiet, then the flavor slowly deepens the longer it stays on the tongue. There's salt, but just enough to open the taste, not overwhelm it. It's simple, it's honest, and it feels like something your body instantly recognizes. Now place that next to Tyson's canned version. The difference shows before the fork touches it. The pieces are tight and dense, almost squared off, as if shaped to hold under pressure. The broth surrounding them is heavy, dense, and seasoned in a way that hits your nose before your mouth. The first bite speaks loud, a fast, salty rush, then the flavor drops flat as soon as it begins. The fibers don't pull naturally, they break in straight lines, the way processed meats do. It fills you, but it doesn't remind you of anything you've had fresh. There's a reason for that gap. Tyson carries the highest sodium load in the 2024 taste test, roughly 450 milligrams in just 3 ounces. That's nearly a fifth of many older adults' recommended daily sodium intake. And that salt isn't there by accident. It's part of the preservation system, part of the brine that keeps the meat stable, and part of the flavor design that helps compensate for what pressure cooking concentrated broth and long-term storage naturally take away. Shelf life demands shortcuts, and every shortcut leaves a fingerprint on the flavor. And this is where an important truth settles: in canned chicken is not and cannot be on the same page as the real thing. Convenience changes the rules not maliciously, just mechanically. To last months on a shelf, the fibers tighten. The moisture shifts. The flavor leans on salt and broth instead of the slow build of natural chicken. None of this makes canned chicken wrong. It simply makes it different from what the fresh version offers without effort. That's why knowing your choices matters. If the day is long, if your energy is thin, canned chicken is a friend. It saves 10 or 15 minutes you might not have. But when you want a dish to taste honest, warm, and familiar, when flavor matters more than speed, the fresh aisle will always be the safer bet. Fresh chicken carries a softness that doesn't need help. a flavor that doesn't need lifting, a texture that stays true even after cooking. And people notice this quietly. A home cook takes a spoonful from a Tyson can while preparing lunch, frowns a little without meaning to, and sets the spoon down. A moment later, she opens the fridge, sees the leftover roasted chicken from last night, and reaches for that instead. No comment, no debate, just instinct, the kind that comes from years of knowing what real chicken feels like. Convenience has its place, but real flavor still lives where the fresh shelves are. 6 Members Mark Premium Chunk Chicken. A large can should not mean a larger letdown. But that's the story many shoppers quietly discover with Members Mark Premium Chunk Chicken, a product that looks like a value win on the shelf, yet behaves very differently the moment it hits the pan. At first glance, the appeal is obvious. The can is big, the price per ounce looks friendly, and Sam's Club has built a reputation for giving families more for less. For anyone cooking large batches, sandwiches for gatherings, casseroles for church nights, soups for a busy week, the size feels reassuring. It promises convenient stability and enough protein to stretch several meals without breaking the budget. Then the can opens. The first thing that comes out isn't chicken, it's broth, a long, heavy stream of it. Enough to make you pause and wonder how much meat is actually inside. When the chicken finally slides out, the pieces look pale and soft, more like pressed strands than real chunks. Once you heat it, the structure weakens even more. Instead of holding shape in the pan, the meat collapses into mushy threads, the kind that spread instead of sear, soften instead of lift a dish. Multiple tests in 2024 showed this exact pattern, more liquid than most competitors, less structure once cooked. And it matters especially for families who rely on the security of bulk. You expect a large can to bring strength to a meal density, firmness, something that anchors the dish. But Members Mark often provides the opposite, chicken that disintegrates before you can build anything around it. This becomes a real problem in everyday cooking. Make a big pot of chicken noodle soup and the meat dissolves into tiny wisps that float thinly instead of giving the broth body. Try using it for sandwiches and it wets the bread more than it fills it. Toss it into a casserole and the dish needs more seasoning, more sauce, more sides, just to feel complete. The value you thought you were buying starts slipping away, not because the can is small, but because the usable part is. And for the families who shop at Sam's Club, this hits harder than it seems. These are people cooking for 5 or 6, people managing tight schedules, tight budgets, or both. When chicken breaks down like this, you end up using more ingredients to fix the dish. More seasoning, more cheese, more pasta, more vegetables. Anything to make the meal feel substantial. What looked like a smart purchase becomes a quiet drain. One father described it simply in an online review: "I buy bulk to make life easier." This made it harder. He had been preparing a large pan of chicken rice for his kids, hoping the can would save prep time. Instead, the meat softened into the pan until it blended almost completely with the broth. The meal fed everyone, but he had to double the dry ingredients and add rotisserie leftovers just to get texture back. That's the disappointment hiding inside this can. Not danger, not scandal. Just inconsistency, the kind that leaves home cooks doing more work than they planned, spending more money than they expected, and questioning whether the value really holds up. When bulk shrinks in the skillet, the bargain disappears. 7 Kirkland Signature Premium Chunk Chicken? Bulk should never mean burden. That's the thought that runs quietly through the mind of many Costco shoppers who reach for Kirkland's Signature Premium Chunk Chicken, a product that should make life easier, not heavier. And the best way to understand this can be through the eyes of someone who buys it with real hope, the everyday Costco loyalist who walks those big aisles with purpose. Imagine a shopper, let's call him Thomas, doing his usual weekend run. He's careful with money, careful with time, and Costco fits him perfectly. He trusts the Kirkland brand. He's trusted it for years. From batteries to olive oil to frozen berries, the name has always meant consistency. So when he sees the tall stack of canned Kirkland chicken, neatly arranged 6 cans bundled together, the math seems obvious. Good value, good quantity, problem solved for several meals. Into the cart it goes. At home, the first can is opened with full confidence. Thomas plans something simple: chicken wraps for lunch. He drains the can and notices the firmness first. The pieces are thick, packed tightly, almost too perfectly shaped. When he presses one between his fingers, it resists more than chicken usually should. Still, he shrugs it off. Shelf-stable foods often behave differently. The real surprise comes when he starts eating. From the first bite, the chew feels dense. Not firm in a fresh way, but tight, almost compressed. It takes effort to break through. The meat holds on longer than expected, leaving a salt-forward finish that lingers on the tongue. It's It's not unpleasant, but it doesn't relax into the bite the way chicken should. Thomas chews again slower this time, wondering why the texture feels like it's pushing back. The wrap tastes heavier than he planned. Not richer, just weightier. And halfway through the meal, he realizes something he's getting tired of chewing. The chicken doesn't blend with the lettuce or tortilla. It sits apart, asking for more jaw work than lunch should ever demand. That's when the disappointment begins to settle. Not dramatic, not angry, just a quiet mismatch between what Kirkland usually promises and what this can delivers. The next day, Thomas tries using it differently in a big bowl of chicken salad. But even mixed with mayo celery and seasoning, the meat holds too firmly. Instead of softening into the dish, it clumps, stays dense, and makes each bite uneven. The saltiness rises again. The meal is edible, sure, but it doesn't feel easy. And Costco shopping is supposed to make meals easier. After the third try, a quick pasta toss, the pattern becomes undeniable. The chicken doesn't lighten dishes, it weights them down, it doesn't blend, it asserts itself. And for older shoppers or anyone who prefers gentle, digestible textures, that firmness becomes a quiet barrier they feel afterward. So the next weekend, Thomas stands in the same aisle where he first picked up the pack. His hand lingers for a moment. He looks at the cans, remembers the chew, the salt, the heaviness that followed each meal. Then he turns his cart and keeps walking, choosing something that feels a little kinder on the plate and kinder on the day. After opening these 7 cans together, the picture becomes clearer. Canned chicken isn't the enemy. It's simply a product of shortcuts, pressure, and long shelf life. Some brands stretch the meat, some lean too hard on salt, others trade texture for convenience. Each one asks for something small from the person eating it, and those small asks slowly add up. But if this journey proves anything, it's that knowledge steadies your hand. When you understand what's inside the can, you don't feel fooled. You feel prepared. You know what to use for speed and what to choose when flavor, health, or comfort truly matter. And that's the bright part. You don't need to give up canned chicken entirely. You just need to pick wisely and keep fresh options in mind. Because the real wins in the kitchen come from clarity, not guesswork.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.